Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. I am really excited today to have with us an attorney out of Virginia, but who has national and international cachet, I would say, because of some of her high media attention on a particular case in which she's involved. So, Devon Slovensky, welcome so much to the show.
Thank you for having me, Krista. I'm delighted to be here and share a little bit about what we're doing in Virginia with your audience.
I love it. So, Devon has a really interesting niche in international child abduction cases. And that triggers something. Now, don't tune out as you hear this thinking it's too hefty for you as a listener, but the Hague Convention, which governs for some countries, those that are Hague countries, international child abduction. And so we're going to talk a lot about that today, but first we're going to talk about what is parental kidnapping in this sort of general divorce context, because I get that question a lot on consult intakes like, hey, my soon to be future ex-spouse is saying I'm kidnapping the child. Can I take the kids to see my parents? Can I go on this trip, etc. So we're going to talk about that first. But Devon, give us a little intro about how you got into this area, particularly of Hague, just so we kind of know what your skill set is and how you develop this niche area.
Sure. So I have always been the family law litigator that if I can get a case into federal court, I will. So I've found little niches to be able to take cases to federal court when I think it's going to help my client. And so Hague is the natural way you end up in federal court as a family law litigator. And you go from being a lowly state court litigator and you just skip above federal litigation. And now you're talking about international legal treaties and you're just sort of skipping the middleman on the federal law. And that's what Hague is about. It's about enforcing international treaties between the different countries that have joined the Hague Convention. And I got into that. I studied in London for a little while. There's a lot of Hague litigation in London. I was there with the American Inns of Court as a Pegasus scholar back in the 20 teens. And it's always just been fascinating to me. So anytime I have an opportunity to advocate for a client in federal court in a family law setting, I am there with bells on.
Generally, for the average listener, what I would say is it's almost not ever actual kidnapping. And you need to kind of probably calm down about that. Okay. But we want to be good co parents. It's very bad to be running kids across state lines and international borders to preclude, if you're not just going on a random trip or you're not trying to protect them from domestic violence and you're just trying to hide kids, you're making a bad mess for yourself. When a divorce is filed, kids are often ordered back into their home state. It just gets into, home state jurisdiction is a whole other thing that becomes important in this as well. So we will put a pin in that. Join me later. I'll probably try to do those episodes soon so that they can be kind of close on the heels of this. But let's move into your area, which is Hague. So we've kind of now dove into the deep end of federal, international law, and tell us, maybe frame what Hague, what Hague is as it relates to this area.
Sure. So I think what people would be shocked to learn is it's not a crime to bring a child into the United States against another parent's parental right. That's a problem, in Canada. That's a crime that you've committed in Canada if there's a Canadian custody order and then you bring a child into the United States. There's not a crime here in the United States side to charge you with. So what we see a lot with, Hague images, either parent, either the primary parent or the non-primary parent or an equal parent decides, hey, I want to bring this child into the United States. And then it's what does the parent who's left behind, what do they do? And what's left for them as a right? And what can they do to make that right when a child is brought into the United States? Another parent has rights in another country, and those parents' rights are abrogated or broken by the child being brought here to the United States. And that's where the Hague Convention comes in. Because now you're not just talking about two parents, living in the state of Colorado or living in the state of Virginia and how their rights, work vis-a-vis each other. Now you've got two different countries, that have to figure out how they're going to talk together and work together over this issue. This is where things kind of get a little legally interesting and my client doesn't know what to do. She's kind of talking to him. She finally realizes, he sends a text message along the lines of, I'm going to bring your child to a good country, they were just going to have your child not have a father in that country, and it's a bad country, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
And she realizes, oh man, he's just not really intending to bring this child back anytime soon. However, he lives in an RV. Okay. So at some point, he acquires an RV. We don't know how long he was in Virginia. He may have been in Virginia for some period of time, but starts traveling around the United States and
Okay.
testifies in court that, he'd seen like 1,000 cities or maybe even 10,000 cities is what he told the court, and is driving this girl around an RV, around the country in an RV. So my client, can kind of learn what's happening, but he won't tell her where she is until after they leave a place.
Mhm.
And again, not speaking language, not knowing what to do. She has a lawyer in Turkey who helps her do an application with the Hague authorities in Turkey. And because Hague is a signer to the because Turkey is a
Turkey.
signer to the
Mhm.
Hague Convention, they are required to have a central authority that helps
Okay.
this treaty be enacted. Okay.
Okay.
Kind of like how we have like DSS offices, or Department of Social Services. I'm not sure what you call it in
Yeah.
Colorado,
Yeah.
like all over the state. If you are a signatory to the Hague Convention, you are also, your country is saying, we're going to have at least some sort of process, maybe not a great process, but we will establish a bureaucratic process to get you set up in this. So she starts doing the paperwork in Turkey, which is, supposed to contact the US State Department, but you still got to know where somebody is. And that was a big part of the problem in this case. She just doesn't know where the dad is because he's going haphazardly, you know, around the United States. And the United States doesn't treat this as kidnapping right now.
Right.
Finally, he's located in Virginia. He settles down in Virginia and buys a house in Virginia in February of this year. But meanwhile, the child's been gone for over a year. And I know, Krista, that's like where your ears are pricking up. You're like, oh, no, 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 no. The child was here for over a year. Crap. That makes the case so much more complicated, because it brings in the ability to start saying, well, the child has been here over a year. Mom didn't do anything. Why did she sleep on her rights? Kid's doing great here. You can start making those kind of arguments. And,
Mhm.
it's our position that wasn't true. And ultimately, the court agreed with us that it wasn't the case, that was met. But you open up a case that should be kind of clear cut into something that now becomes a little bit more like a messy gray area custody case. So, you can try to throw apart the prima facie case and just say the prima facie case is wrong. Or, there are exceptions in the law. And you can say, hey, well, they're right, but, we've got some exceptions in the law. And so that's what their case, the case that they put on. So they tried to find exceptions in the law. And, the first one is the well-settled child defense. And they were trying to say the child is not well-settled. And there's a ton of case law on what a well-settled child is. The younger the child, the stronger the presumption against well-settled, but it's not even technically a legal presumption. But the idea is, a child's home, if you will, when you're talking about a really young child, is like their parent is
Right.
with them. But it's a holistic, look at things. And when a lawyer hears holistic, they think, oh no,
Yeah.
complicated,
Yeah.
because you're talking about all these different factors, So we look at the family relationships, the
Mhm.
emotional stability of the relationships. And one thing I thought was really interesting about this case is that they tried to say that the child had lost her native language skills in the year and a half that she
Interesting.
had been abducted here. And I thought that was an interesting argument. It was undercut by the fact that the defendant chose to speak with the child in the native language in the courtroom during a courtroom break.
Now,
But yeah, so
he chose to speak with who? The child?
with his child, the
Why is
child
the
was at
child
court.
there at the courtroom?
Judge wanted the child there.
Really interesting. Okay.
Yeah, it was important to this judge that this child be there at that court. There had been a lot of concern, I think, about the ability to follow court orders.
Okay.
Um,
Oh,
there had
interesting.
been an initial, when you start off a Hague case, you very quickly get a temporary injunction,
Mhm.
okay? And you try to lock down those passports so they can't flee.
Mhm.
Um, and, that's one of the first things we did in this case is get an emergency injunction. And there's a whole process for that. But part of the emergency injunction wasn't you can't leave the state. You can't leave the jurisdiction of this court. You can't leave this half of Virginia. And we didn't end up fully litigating it because it wasn't, critical, but the guy comes into court and says, essentially that he had gone into the other half of the state in violation, of the order. So there was questions, and, there had been a Turkish, there had been a Turkish court order telling him not to leave Turkey because there had been a criminal, charge going on in Turkey as well. And so, the whole fugitive concern there, led to some extra concerns here in the United States about the ability to follow a court order. So that's why the child was there.